make about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they were a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.
Hello, and welcome to Candidates Up Front. This program gives voters information directly from the candidates, and these are candidates running in the May 18th municipal primary election. It is a joint project of the League of Women Voters of Berks County and Berks Community Television. Both are nonpartisan organizations that never support nor oppose political parties nor candidates. Today, our featured race is Judge of the Court of Common Pleas. The Court of Common Pleas hears trials of major criminal and civil matters. It hears matters involving families and children, and it hears appeals from minor courts. The current salary is $186,665, and judges serve a 10-year term. Voters in each party will select 2 of 5 candidates. The 5 candidates in alphabetical order are Tina Boyd, Osmer Deming, James Gavin, Kurt Geisinger, and Catherine Nadaroff. All will be asked the same questions in the same order with the same general time limit. And each candidate's views are theirs and not necessarily those of the League or BCTV. And today, our candidate is James Gavin. Welcome, Mr. Gavin.
Thank you.
Please tell us why you've decided to run for judge and what education and background you bring to the position.
Approximately 150 years ago, Justice Joseph Story of the United States Supreme Court said that our personal security, our rights, and our interests rest upon the wisdom, the stability, and the integrity of the courts and the judges who serve in those courts. My name is James Gavin, and I am running for Judge of the Court of Common Pleas of Berks County. I'm running because I very, very strongly believe that integrity and experience matter. I want to thank Berks County Television and the League of Women Voters for having us here today. In preparation of today's meeting, I reviewed some of the principles of the League of Women Voters, and I want to identify those that I think are very important. One is that the powers of our government, including the judiciary, should be exercised by people who are competent. And number 2, the powers of government should be exercised within the constitutional framework of the balance among the 3 branches, the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. For today's purposes, I am seeking a position in the judiciary. I've been practicing law for over 32 years. I am the father of 3 children, the grandfather of 1, and recently learned that I will be the grandfather of twins by the end of the summer, which is very exciting for my family and I. During the course of my career, I worked as a prosecutor at the beginning of my career, and then I left the district attorney's office and I went into private practice where I've done an incredibly vast amount of different types of litigation, commercial cases, civil cases, all types of things, real estate matters. And with those, all of that experience and my education, including a master's degree in trial work, are all of the things that I bring to the table that I think will make me an excellent candidate and an excellent judge.
Is there a person or a moment in your life that influenced you to run for judge?
I've thought about running for judge for a long time now, and as I've made this decision, I've come to realize that there really are quite a few people in my life that have influenced me in this decision. I could name a number of judges in the Court of Common Pleas of Berks County and the federal courts that influenced me, but the one I'd like to point out the most is my former partner, retired federal judge Thomas M. Golden, who, when giving me an opportunity to sit as a hearing officer in a case, sat down and told me I had to make him a promise. And the promise was that I would never forget compassion. I have maintained that promise, and I anticipate to continue to maintain that promise.
Who is your favorite U.S. Supreme Court justice, past or present, and tell us why?
My favorite Supreme Court justice is Justice Lewis Powell. Justice Powell came from the South. He was a Nixon appointee, but the thing that I like about him was he understood the role of a judge, and he was always a gentleman. He would famously say to people at arguments, "Counsel, may I ask you a question?" Even though we all understand that as a judge, he had no obligation to ask a question, to ask for permission to ask a question, but he did because he understood that the professionalism of the bench required that.
If you were talking to someone with no legal or political background, how would you explain the difference between a conservative judge and a liberal judge?
The distinction between a conservative judge and a liberal judge is often based upon whether the judge should be following the law or whether the judge should be making the law. Going back to the framework of our Constitution, the judiciary are not policymakers and they are not lawmakers. The job of a judge is to follow the law and apply the law based upon the facts. So that's the distinction that I would make.
And under what circumstances would you recuse yourself from a case?
Recusal is an interesting subject. That is the situation where a judge has been assigned a case and he or she makes the decision that they should not preside over the case. There are two primary places where you should do that. The first one is if you have a self-interest in the case. So, for example, if the case related to my neighbor's property and they want to develop it, I probably should not be presiding over that case. And under that case, I would recuse myself. The second scenario is one where I simply believe, for whatever reason, that I cannot be fair. And if I cannot be fair, I owe it to the litigants, I owe it to the system, and I owe it to my own integrity not to preside in that case, and I step down.
How would you explain to citizens who are called for jury duty what the duties are that they have and why it's important for them to serve?
I'm fortunately one of those people who's actually been called to serve on a jury, and I went in and I did not make it to the final jury, but I've done it. I've tried many, many jury trials. The first thing is most people that appear for jury duty are concerned about missing work and those types of things, and once you address that issue, often they like to be there. They enjoy it because being a member of a jury is actually participating in the government that we all have here, the government of the people. It allows us to sit as the finder, or more precisely, the jurors to sit as the finders of the facts based upon the evidence that they hear in the courtroom as objectively as they can. And I can tell you, most of my jury trial experiences, all of the jurors I've seen have been really, really good.
What is the appropriate role for a common pleas judge when there's an end-of-life dispute brought to the court by family members?
The court's role on this issue and many other issues that we may talk about today is fundamentally to follow the law as it is written by the state legislature and as it has been interpreted by the higher appellate courts of Pennsylvania. So in an end-of-life situation, what a judge would do is he or she would look at the law as it's written, listen to the case, listen to the evidence that is presented, weigh it very carefully, and apply the law to reach the appropriate resolution of the matter.
In sentencing convicted criminals, what factors should be considered, and when is an alternate to jail appropriate?
In Pennsylvania, we have sentencing guidelines that are used for the purposes of sentencing people that have been convicted of crimes. So a judge, when imposing a sentence must consider those guidelines. That's the first thing. The second thing that the judge should be looking at is any aggravating factors and any mitigating factors. Just a very simple example of what could be an aggravating factor or a mitigating factor is age. The age of the victim could be an aggravating factor or a mitigating factor, or the age of the defendant could be an aggravating factor or a mitigating factor. In terms of sentencing alternatives, again, that comes from the law and bears some relationship to the seriousness of the offense. The less serious offense has the greater sentencing alternatives available to it.
Please give us your views on plea bargaining.
I think plea bargaining is somewhat of a misnomer. The fact is that there are negotiations that go on in the legal system all the time, both the criminal system and the civil system, and the family system for that matter. And it is an effective way to allow cases to move forward. In my experience, I've never seen anybody get a quote-unquote bargain, but I have seen people get negotiated sentences that are accurate reflections of the sentencing guidelines, and they save the court time and money in moving the cases through the system. So it's a necessary part of the system.
If you are elected, in what area would you prefer to serve? Criminal, civil, family, or special court? Tell us why.
Thank you. When I first decided to pursue this, I spoke to all of the judges in the Court of Common Pleas, and I specifically asked that question, how assignments were made. And assignments are made on the basis of need, and based upon all of my experience through my 32 years or more of practicing law, I can fit into any one of them. But if I had a choice, my choice would be the following. I would like to be assigned to the civil bench and be placed on the murder rotation. That means I handle mostly civil cases, but I'm also assigned some murder cases to handle. The reason that I want to do that is because, in my opinion, personally, those areas of the law provide the most work, honestly, and I'm taking this job to work, and they provide the most diverse examples of things that I can be handling. It will be different every single day.
Why is the position of judge so important that people should come out to vote for it?
It goes back to where I started today. The judiciary is 1/3 of the government that the founding fathers set up. And I've said to many people about the Constitution, they said, what do I think of it? And I said, I think I'm a reasonably smart person, but the people that wrote the Constitution were brilliant. This is a position in 1/3 of the government. The members of the community really need to pay attention to all judicial elections because it is 1/3 of your government. You cannot ignore it. These are the people that deal with factual situations involving real people every single day. You want the most experienced and competent people in those positions, and you have the right to participate in that selection.
As a member of the judiciary, what can you do, either on or off the bench, to ensure that all Pennsylvanians have access to justice?
The most important thing that a judge can do, and frankly, if you pay attention to what some of the Supreme Court justices do, is they participate in the education process. Judges cannot take policy-making positions. They cannot take positions on what the law should or should not be. That's for the legislative and the executive branch. But what we can do, and we should do, is actively participate in the education of the community, the education in our schools, our high schools, and our colleges on how the legal system works and why it is so important. In my opinion, that's the most important thing that a judge can do to help advance the legal system in the community.
Pennsylvania is one of 2 states that does not provide any state funding for a public defender's office. Instead, the public defenders are funded by county taxes, resulting in great disparity from one judicial district to another. How would you address this so all defendants have access to competent lawyers to protect their legal rights before the court?
Ultimately, the most important thing that a judge can do in addressing the issue of making sure that an accused individual has the most competent lawyer relates to the court's ability to appoint counsel. Depending on the seriousness of the case and the factual issues involved, I would have the power to appoint certain attorneys to represent individuals. I do not have funding power. That is a power left to the legislature and the executive branch. Nonetheless, I can say this. The reality is effective legal counsel results in efficient and effective administration of justice and saves the taxpayers money in the long run. So to protect the individual rights and to protect community rights, having very, very effective public defenders and court-appointed counsels is critical.
Alternatives to incarceration not only cost less, but often result in less recidivism. What is your view on alternatives to incarceration for nonviolent offenders?
Each and every time a person appears in front of the court needs to recognize that the odds are really high, way better than 90-95%, that whatever the punishment is, that person is going to end up back on the street in the job market trying to support a family. So the judge has to consider the sentencing alternatives that make that person's chances of success outside of the legal system, outside of the criminal justice system, as high as possible. So absolutely, I support anything that allows that person to accept responsibility and be held responsible for what he or she did, but to be given the opportunity to succeed when they've paid their price to the community.
How would you deal with difficult cases, especially those that are highly publicized?
During the course of my career, I've actually been involved in very highly publicized cases. When I was a prosecutor, I was involved in a number of public corruption cases and a number of homicide cases that had a great deal of publicity. What you have to do when you're involved in those cases is you have to maintain your integrity at all times. You have to do what is right, you have to do it for the right reason, and you have to have the courage to stand by the decisions that you make. You handle the publicity by following the law. The Supreme Court has given us very clear guidelines on how to do these, and we continue to follow the law at all times. It is important for the judge to maintain control of the court and control of the case in a way that effectively balances the community's right to know and the party's right to have a fair trial.
Major crime cases are a great concern to voters. Can judges do anything to reduce crime and reduce repeat offenses?
I've always thought that the most important case for a judge to decide is the very first time that a person appears in front of him. The decision that the judge makes on that case is going to determine whether or not that person is likely to offend again, or whether they're likely to get on a path of being a productive member of the community. So yes, I think the judge can do things at the early stages when somebody's in the system for the very first time. That becomes more challenging if recidivism occurs, and that's where the sentencing guidelines will provide for increased sentencing over time.
Juveniles may face mandatory criminal charges. How can we protect our schools, protect our communities, and at the same time not irrevocably hurt the juvenile who makes a mistake?
As a father of 3 children, I've always been very concerned about the things that impact my children, the things that impact their friends. I strongly believe that we all have a commitment to our children. I often say I've yet to meet a child that has asked to be in this world. We all brought them in here in one way or another, and we all have an obligation to them, ourselves for our own children and for other people's children. The things we need to do are to educate them, to provide them with as many opportunities as we can to have successful lives. If they end up in the legal system, which happens sometimes and is unfortunate, I go back to my earlier statement. Those very first appearances are the most critical. Judge Grimm, who's one of my favorite judges, helps these people all of the time and comes down off the bench and he shakes their hands to show them how important they are.
Berks County has established special courts to address crimes related or connected to illness, such as a drug court or veterans court. Do you support alternatives to sentencing established by these courts? And do you think we need additional special courts? And if so, for what groups?
I had a client one time who her parents called me up and told me that she was seriously addicted to heroin and she was arrested. The fact is the crime paled in comparison to the threat to her life that the drugs provided. We got her into treatment court, and after the better part of a year and a half in the treatment court, I went in and I saw Judge Peter Schmale one day, and I said, "Your Honor, I need to tell you that when I met this girl, I thought she was going to die, and today she is going to live." The fact is, yes, we need these courts. We need these sentencing alternatives. I think a court for the drug treatment is a wonderful thing. A court for mental health treatment is a wonderful thing. A court for veterans is a wonderful thing. And I think we should be willing to explore any other type of court that helps.
Medical marijuana is lawful in Pennsylvania, yet active ingredients in marijuana remain a federally controlled substance. Do you support measures to make federal law more consistent with state law? And describe your approach to the inconsistencies in these laws.
As a practical matter, it is in the best interest of all of us that our laws be consistent. As a trial judge in Berks County, Pennsylvania, I have no control over what the federal law is. But when presented with a situation where I must interpret the law, and if there is any inconsistency, I do so by following the Statutory Construction Act in Pennsylvania that gives judges guidelines as to how we are supposed to interpret and apply laws that are inconsistent.
In Pennsylvania, judges run as a member of a political party. What is the significance of party affiliation for judgeships?
Judges are supposed to be nonpartisan. As a judge, if I'm assigned a case, I should not be ruling on that case as to whether the person is a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, much in the same way I should not be ruling on that case based upon the color of the person's skin, their gender, or any of those items. What I should do and what I will do is apply the law the way the law is written to the facts that are presented to me.
How do you feel about the nonpartisan selection of judges, and what are your thoughts on merit selection of judges?
Again, nonpartisan elections for judges are what the ultimate goal should be, because judges, unlike the other two political branches, are not political. We're going through a political process right now, but again, politics should not be influencing my decisions in any way. Any method that can be used to remove the politics from the selection of judges, be it through cross-filing, be it through merit selection, or some other mechanism, is a good thing in my opinion.
Past judicial campaigns have been noted for high spending, and that's been true here in Berks County. Please explain your view on money in politics.
Money in politics and money in judicial races are a challenge. The election costs money. There's no question about that. I think a better situation is one where we can reduce the role of money in the politics, but it exists. Again, I return to what I've said before. The things that we can do to have judges selected on the basis of their qualifications above all else is the most important thing.
Are you involved in volunteer community work? If so, please tell us about it, and you can take a full minute on this one.
You might need more than a full minute on this one. Well, thank you.
That'll shorten the close by a little bit, but not
it
much.
Might, but that's fine. I'm happy to share. Many, many years ago, one Christmas morning, we told our children before they could open their Christmas gifts that they had to write an essay on what it meant to be a Gavin. And this was kind of a fun thing that we did with our kids. And they did it jointly. And they wrote, one of the things about being a Gavin is you need to volunteer. This is a lesson that we've taught our children, and we've taught it to them by our examples. Some of the things that I have done being an active member of the community. I was president of my children's home and school association at the Sacred Heart School in West Reading. While I was there, I spearheaded a project that won the Home and School Association, the National Catholic Education Home and School Association of the Year Award. One of the other proud community things that I've served on was I served on the board of directors of Safe Berks when it was known as Berks Women in Crisis. I have continued to serve on it as it's been as Safe Berks and its governance committee. They had a walk to support the organization and to combat domestic violence and sexual violence. And I walked in that with my entire family, my children, and their friends. And I was the highest fundraiser 2 years in a row. I could go on. I was on the board of the Animal Rescue League. I was on the board of the Mental Health Association. I will do whatever I can to support the community and support matters that are important to me and my family.
Let's take a minute and 15 seconds for a closing argument.
A closing argument.
closing
asking a
statement.
trial lawyer to make a closing argument
Sorry.
is a wonderful thing. There's no need to apologize.
Closing statement.
Here's what's important when you're choosing your judge. You need to understand that the judges in our court system deal with the problems that exist in our society every day. Someday it is possible that a member of your family is involved in the system, and it could be because they got arrested for drunk driving. God forbid they were a victim of a crime. Perhaps it's a custody matter. Perhaps you hired somebody to put in your kitchen and they didn't do it the right way and you spent a lot of money on that and you want your money back. You need to know that when you are going into court, you are going in to appear in front of a judge, one who is going to take the time to listen to you. Two is going to show you respect and show you that he or she cares, and that you know and you have confidence that that judge has the experience and the training to be the judge that can properly hear your case. As I said at the beginning today, my name is James Gavin, and I'm running for Judge of the Court of Common Pleas because for me personally, integrity and experience really matter, and that is what you have the right to expect from the judges in your county.
Thank you. We thank you, James Gavin, for talking with us about his qualifications and his philosophy to be a judge of the Court of Common Pleas. And viewers, please remember the municipal primary election is May 18th. To vote, you must be registered by May 3rd. Now, you can check your registration status, or you can request a mail-in ballot. For that, you go to votespa.com. That's votespa.com. And for information on other races, you go to vote411.org. And please continue to watch BCTV. We'll have more candidate information, and we'll have information on the constitutional amendments that will be on your ballot. For the League of Women Voters, I'm Judith Cranis. Good day.
We make about 45 million pounds of chips in a quarter. That equates to about 200 million pounds of potatoes, which is quite a few. What's interesting with M&T is they're a small town bank, and as we've grown, they've also grown with us. They've got the resources that you would need in order to go big, but they also have that friendly local community feel so that it makes it seem easier than it probably is.